The sky was dark and full of smoke, the planet was broken, the buildings were falling the ground. Was shaking, the wind was hot and full of dust, everything was silent except the sound of crying from under the rubble. The small alien princess was lying there alone. She was weak, her silver dress was torn, her crown was broken, her hands were full of scratches. She looked around, but no one was there. Her people had left her. They ran away when the enemy ships came. They did not try to protect her. They left her behind to save their own lives. Her guards were the first to leave, then her teachers, then even her family. They all escaped in hidden ships. The princess was only 5 years old. She did not understand why no one came back for her. She tried to move, but her leg was hurt. She could not walk. She called for help again and again, but no one answered. Her voice was soft and scared. A small camera drone from the palace flew by. It recorded her face, her tears, her pain, and sent the signal into space. The signal was weak, full of static. It was lost in space. Soon no one on her planet cared about the signal anymore. They thought the princess was dead. They did not want to remember her. She was now just another lost soul in the ruins of a forgotten war. Far away on a human space station above a nearby moon, a black rescue dog named Max was lying near a console. Max was not a normal dog. He was trained for rescue missions. He could find life signs. He could open doors. He could even understand human speech. The space station was quiet. The humans were resting. The signal from the princess reached the station, but it was too weak to alert the system. It passed through the antennas like a whisper. Max suddenly raised his head. His ears stood up. His eyes looked at the screen. He began to bark loudly. He scratched the floor. He ran to the console and stared at the blinking red light that no one saw but him. A young human officer named Leo heard the barking. He came out of his room and walked to Max. He was confused. Max never acted like this before. He asked Max what was wrong. Max barked again and jumped at the screen. Leo looked at it. The signal was strange, almost silent, but something was there, a voice, maybe a child crying. He tried to boost the signal. It was not clear, but he heard the word help again and again in a broken alien voice. Leo felt something in his chest, a soft pain. He looked at Max. Max was staring at him with sad eyes. Leo knew Max wanted to go. He wanted to find the voice, the girl who was crying in the ruins. Leo asked the captain for permission, but the captain said no, it was too dangerous. They had no orders to leave the station. Leo walked back to his room, but Max did not stop. He ran to the hangar. He pressed the launch buttons with his nose. He barked until the lights turned on. The doors opened. The rescue pod was ready. Max sat inside and waited for Leo. Leo stood at the door. He looked at the blinking light on the screen. He heard the cry again. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then he stepped into the pod and locked the door. The pod launched into space. It was small, fast, and silent inside. Max sat near the window, his eyes full of focus. Leo was checking the map. The signal was getting weaker. He hoped they were not too late. The planet came into view. It was broken, burnt, and empty. The pod entered the atmosphere. Dust and smoke covered the land. Leo looked down. He saw the ruins of a palace. He saw fire and ashes. Max barked again. He jumped at the door. Leo opened it and followed Max outside. The air was hot, full of smoke. Max ran fast, his nose close to the ground. He moved around broken walls, burned trees, and crushed stones. Leo followed him. The sound of fire and wind was loud, but Max kept running. He stopped near a broken pillar. He scratched the ground. He barked loudly. Leo came close. He heard a small sound under the stones, a voice soft like wind crying for help. He began to move the stones. Max helped with his paws together. They cleared the way there. She was the little alien princess, her eyes full of fear, her face dirty, her body shaking. She looked at them and cried. She thought they were more soldiers come to finish her. Max slowly walked to her. He did not bark. He sat near her and looked into her eyes. She looked back and saw kindness. She touched his fur and closed her eyes. She whispered something in her own language. Leo understood it somehow. Thank you. Sky was still dark, but now one light had returned to this broken world, the light of a child who was not alone anymore, and a loyal dog who had come to save her when no one else did. The wind blew harder now as the dog Max stood close to the alien princess. His eyes soft, his body still. He did not move quickly. He waited for her to feel safe. She looked at him with wide eyes, her small hand still holding a broken toy close to her chest. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak and dry. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Max gently lowered his head and nudged a small water capsule toward her. Leo opened his bag and gave her some more water. The girl drank. It slowly, her eyes never leaving the dog's face. Max moved back a little and barked. Once softly, the girl blinked as if she understood something. She reached out and touched his ear. Max leaned into her hand as if saying, "I am here, you are safe." Leo looked at both of them and felt something inside his chest, something strong and deep. This girl had no one, no army, no family, no home. And yet this dog had come all the way to this burning world just to find her and protect her. Back on the human space station, alarms were now flashing. The rescue pod was gone. The captain shouted at the crew, asking who took the ship. They checked the logs and saw Leo's name. The captain was angry. He knew Leo was brave, but this mission was not approved. The station sent a signal to recall the pod, but no answer came through. The planet's atmosphere was thick with static. The captain sat down and looked at the screen. He saw the last signal from the pod and shook his head. The planet Leo carried the princess in his arms, while Max led the way. The ruins were full of dangers. Fire still burned in corners. Sharp glass and metal were everywhere. The air was hot like a furnace, but Max kept moving, his nose in the air, his steps careful, his mind focused. He stopped near a broken wall and barked twice. Leo put the girl down and looked where Max pointed. He saw an old service tunnel, half blocked by stones. It led to an underground shelter. They entered the tunnel. It was dark and cold inside. The walls were cracked. The floor was wet. The girl held Leo's hand tightly while Max walked ahead like a shadow, his nose close to the ground. He stopped near a control panel and barked. Leo pushed the button. The door creaked and opened, revealing a small room with old supplies. Max jumped on a box and sat guard while Leo made a small bed for the girl using blankets and cloth he found nearby. The girl finally spoke, her voice like wind through leaves. She told them her name was Lyra. She said she was the last of her family. Her father had ordered the guards to protect her, but they ran the moment the enemy broke through the palace walls. She had waited for help. She had cried and screamed, but no one came until the dog came, until Max found her. Leo listened in silence. He looked at Max, who sat watching them, his eyes full of wisdom. Lyra asked why the dog came for her. Leo smiled and told her Max was not an ordinary dog. He was born on Earth in a military base. His parents were rescue dogs. He was trained to find people who were lost or hurt. He had saved soldiers trapped in tunnels. He had found children lost in alien forests. He had jumped into fire to pull people out. He was brave, loyal, and kind, but there was more. Max had something no machine had, a heart that could hear pain that no one else heard. Lyra looked at Max and smiled. She crawled to him and hugged him. Max licked her cheek gently and let out a soft, happy sound. Leo felt his eyes get wet, but he turned away, pretending to check his bag. Outside the tunnel, the sky turned red and dark. Shadows moved in the smoke. Machines scanned the ground looking for life signs. They were not human. They were hunters sent by the enemy to find any survivors and end them quietly, quickly, without a sound. One of the machines stopped near the ruins. It turned its head and scanned the air. It caught a faint heat signal below the ground. It sent a message to the others. They moved slowly toward the tunnel with silent steps. Max suddenly stood up, his ears high, his body still like stone. He growled low. Leo grabbed his blaster and turned off the lights. He held Lyra close and told her to stay quiet. The air grew heavy. The tunnel shook slightly as footsteps echoed above them. Max moved toward the tunnel entrance and lay down flat, his nose twitching, his eyes glowing in the dark. Leo aimed his blaster at the door, ready to fight, ready to protect the girl the way Max had done, but the machines did not enter yet. They waited above, as if listening, as if thinking. Leo whispered to Max, "Do you think they will find us?" Max did not move. His tail flicked once, as if to say, "Not yet, not now." Lyra held her toy tightly, her heart pounding, her eyes wide. She looked at the dog and the man and knew they were here for her. They would not run. They would not leave her like the others. The dog had chosen her. The man had followed, and together they had become her shield in a world that had forgotten her. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you again." Far above, the stars blinked in silence. But one dog on one broken planet had changed everything by simply choosing to care. The cold silence of the tunnel was broken only by the soft breath of the little alien princess. She sat close to Max, her head resting against his warm fur, her eyes slowly closing, but her heart still full of fear. Leo sat nearby, his blaster ready. His ears focused on the sound above. The hunters were still there, their heavy steps slow and careful as they searched for life. Hidden under the broken palace above them, the world was turning to dust, but deep underground three souls stayed close. Hoping for safety and a chance to survive, Max stood up and walked to the tunnel edge. He sniffed the air, his ears twitching. He moved without sound, his body trained to avoid making even the smallest noise. He turned back and looked at Leo, then at Lyra. She nodded as if she understood Max was about to do something dangerous. She held her toy tightly and whispered to it like a secret prayer. Leo followed Max slowly, crouching low. He stepped over broken pipes and fallen bricks. The deeper they moved, the more the air smelled of fire and metal. They reached a large chamber with strange alien writing on the walls. It looked like a throne room, but now it was full of ashes and shadows. Max stopped and sniffed again. His nose touched the floor. He looked up at Leo and barked once very softly. Leo knelt and brushed away the ash. He found a hidden hatch covered in silver dust. He pressed the old lock and it clicked open. A secret passage led downward, its walls smooth and glowing faintly with purple light. Leo turned back and signaled Lyra to come. She stood up slowly, her legs still weak, but her spirit stronger now. She followed them into the new tunnel. The walls began to hum. As they walked, the air was strange, warm and cold at the same time. The lights on the walls showed moving symbols like they were alive. Lyra looked around and whispered that this was part of the ancient palace, the secret path used by her ancestors to escape during war. Only the royal family knew about it, but she had seen it once in a dream. They walked deeper and came to a wide underground chamber with broken statues and a giant map carved on the floor. Leo looked at the map and realized it was a plan of the palace, and the land beyond it showed all the secret exits and hidden chambers. Max barked again and ran to a small platform. He jumped on it and looked at Lyra. She stepped forward and placed her hand on a glowing stone on the wall. Suddenly the entire map lit up, showing red blinking dots moving across the land above. Leo understood that the red dots were hunters tracking them. With every step, the chamber began to close. The door behind them shut with a loud thud and the lights flickered. Lyra fell back and Max caught her before she hit the ground. She was shaking, her energy almost gone. Leo picked her up and placed her on a soft mat near a warm vent. He covered her with his jacket and whispered that everything would be okay. Max lay next to her, his eyes still watching the map. Leo searched the room and found old supplies, food packs, water capsules, and strange alien tools. One of the tools looked like a signal booster. He worked quickly, connecting wires and pressing buttons. A faint signal reached the surface, but not strong enough to call for help. He sighed and sat back, his eyes heavy, but his mind racing. They had to find a way out before the hunters broke in. Suddenly the walls shook, dust fell from the ceiling. A loud bang echoed through the tunnel behind them. The hunters had found the old passage and were forcing their way in. Leo grabbed his blaster and Max stood in front of Lyra, growling low and deep. Lyra opened her eyes and tried to stand, but fell again. She reached out and touched Max's back as if drawing strength from him. Leo looked at her and nodded. He knew they had to move fast. Max led them to another small door hidden behind a fallen statue. Leo pushed it open and they crawled through a tight shaft full of pipes and wires. The air grew thin and hot. Lyra was coughing but kept moving. Max moved ahead, guiding them like a ghost through the darkness. They reached a round chamber with glass walls looking out at the ruined city. Above the chamber was a lift used for royal escape. It needed power and the panel was dead. Leo opened the panel and used the alien tools to connect wires. He asked Lyra to place her hand on the screen. She did, and the panel lit up. The lift began to hum. The glass doors opened and they stepped inside. Max stood guard as the lift rose slowly toward the surface. Outside, the city was silent, ashes floating in the wind, broken towers reaching for a sky that no longer cared. As they reached the top, the glass shattered from the side. A hunter had jumped on the lift, its red eyes glowing, its claws sharp and deadly. Max leaped forward with all his strength, slamming into the machine. They both fell from the platform into the fire below. Leo screamed and reached out, but saw only flames. Lyra fell to her knees, tears in her eyes, her heart breaking. But in that moment, something strange happened. The lift stopped, the light on the panel turned green, and a voice spoke in her language. "Welcome, princes. The royal escape ship is ready." She looked up and wiped her tears, her voice calm now. She stood and whispered, "Thank you, Max. We will not forget." The doors of the lift opened with a soft hiss and the sound of wind rushed in the sky above was filled with red clouds and falling ash. The ruins of the city stretched far in every direction. Broken towers, sharp stones, and melted metal made the land look like a grave for forgotten dreams. Lyra stepped out slowly, her eyes full of sorrow, her small hand still holding the corner of Leo's jacket. The pain of losing Max was fresh like fire in her chest. She wanted to cry, but no tears came, only silence. Leo followed her, his eyes moving fast, scanning every broken wall, every shadow, every flicker of movement. He held his blaster close, but his mind was not on danger. His thoughts were with Max, the brave dog who had saved them, who had jumped into fire without fear, who had been more than a pet, more than a soldier, more than a friend. He was something else, something no words could hold. They walked through the ruins toward the old hangar, where the Royal escape ship was supposed to be. The wind howled through empty windows, and loose sheets of metal clanged like ghosts in the air. Lyra stopped suddenly. She turned her head as if she heard something. She looked behind her, then up at the sky. Her lips moved, but she said nothing. Leo asked what happened, but she shook her head. She did not know. It was just a feeling like something was not lost, yet the hangar was a wide space half buried in rubble. The ceiling broken in the middle, the floor covered in ash and black marks from old fires. The escape ship was still there, hidden under a thick tarp of alien fabric, its surface covered in dust but mostly untouched. Leo ran to the ship and began clearing the cover, checking the engines, opening the panels, and looking for power sources. Lyra stood nearby, silent, her eyes on the shadows around them, as if she waited for something to come out. Leo pressed the buttons on the panel, but nothing happened. The ship was dead, no light, no hum, no hope. He kicked aside in frustration and looked at Lyra. She walked to the ship and placed her hand on a small round symbol near the door. The symbol glowed faintly, and the ship responded. Lights flickered, and the engines gave a low growl. The doors opened slowly, revealing the inside, warm and bright. The air inside smelled clean, not like the death and ash outside. They stepped inside, and the door closed behind them, sealing them away from the dying world. For a moment it felt safe. Lyra sat on a soft seat near the window and looked outside, her reflection staring back at her small face, silver eyes, thin arms, and long hair full of ash. Leo checked the controls and saw that the ship needed time to charge before flight, maybe 1 hour, maybe less if the backup cells worked, but they had no idea if the hunters were close or far. Suddenly, a sound came from the ship's back door, a scratching, soft, then loud, then fast, like claws against steel. Leo raised his blaster and ran toward the sound, his heart pounding, but when he opened the door he froze, standing there covered in dust and burns was Max, his fur blackened, his legs shaking, but his eyes full of light. Lyra screamed in joy and ran to him. She hugged him tight and cried into his neck. Max let out a soft sound and licked her cheek, his tail wagging just a little. Leo knelt and touched Max, gently checking for wounds. Max was hurt but alive, bones bruised, fur burned but no deep cuts. No broken legs. He had jumped into fire and somehow found a way out. He had followed their scent, found the path, and returned. He had never stopped, even when the world turned against him. Lyra held him close and whispered thank you over and over like a song. Time passed slowly as they waited, the ship charging, Max sleeping, Lyra sitting beside him, her hand on his back. Leo watching the monitors, his eyes moving between the map and the countdown. He saw red dots moving again, slowly coming closer. They had maybe 15 minutes, maybe less, before the hunters reached them. He loaded his blaster and closed the outer hatch, sealing the ship completely. Lyra looked up and asked if they would make it. Leo smiled and nodded, but inside he was not sure. He looked at Max and felt courage rise again. Max had come back from fire, from pain, from death itself, and he was still standing, still watching, still guarding. Lyra looked out the window and said something in her own language. Leo asked what it meant, and she said it means heart that does not give up. That was what she would call Max now, not just a name, but a truth. The ship gave a soft chime. The engines now ready. The screen blinked green and the map showed the sky path. Open the gate above the city was clear for a short time, a few minutes of flight before it closed again. Leo sat in the pilot seat, Max beside him, Lyra behind them, holding her toy and watching the stars. The engines roared and the ship lifted into the sky, ash swirling around them, fire below, wind screaming, the ground breaking as the hunters burst from the ruins, shooting lasers at the ship. The blasts hit the shield, but the ship held strong. Max barked once like thunder, and Leo pressed the button. The ship flew up fast, cutting through clouds, breaking through smoke, and then into clear space where stars waited like silent friends. Lyra closed her eyes and held Max tight. She knew now that hope was not in crowns or palaces or armies. Hope was in loyalty and courage and love, and in the heart of a dog who refused to let her die alone. The stars outside the window shined like a field of quiet fire as the escape ship moved through space. The sky was black and wide, but the danger was not behind yet. Leo watched the radar, his eyes locked on the red signals that blinked like warnings in the dark. The hunters were fast, strong, and never gave up. They were machines made for one purpose: to finish what others could not finish. They followed heat signals, movement, energy trails, and even memory patterns. They were closer than Leo had hoped. Max stood near the door, his body weak but alert, his eyes calm but watching every flicker on the screen. Lyra sat with her arms around her knees, her face pale but not afraid. She looked at Max with trust. She looked at Leo with quiet hope. She had been abandoned, once left in the dust by her own people, but now she had something stronger than a kingdom. She had friends who stayed. The ship beeped, a soft sound that meant danger. Leo checked the screen again and saw 3 hunter ships gaining speed. They were small but deadly, armed with weapons that could break shields in seconds. Leo tightened his grip on the controls and turned the ship toward the edge of the system. He had to reach the old moon base, a place forgotten by many but still marked in the human maps. It was hidden inside a crater with old walls strong enough to hide a signal and enough supplies to survive. Max barked once and moved to the control panel. Leo looked at him and smiled. He knew what Max wanted to say: we fight if we must, but we never give up. Lara stood and walked to the front seat. She asked Leo if they would make it. He nodded, but his eyes told the truth. They were outmatched, outgunned, and running on low power. The hunters were getting closer, their cold eyes locked on the heat signature of the escape ship. Leo turned off the main thrusters and used small pulses to guide the ship through the asteroid field near the moon. The rocks were dangerous, sharp, and always moving, but they could hide the ship from the hunters for a little while. Max helped by marking safe paths with his paw on the screen, his memory perfect, his focus sharp. He had done this before in other missions, in other wars, in other skies. The ship weaved between the rocks, silent and fast. The hunters lost visual contact and paused to scan the area. Leo shut off all lights and told Lyra to stay still. They waited in darkness, surrounded by floating stone. The only sound was the slow breath of Max and the quiet beat of Lyra's heart. She held her toy and whispered again that word: hope. Minutes passed like hours. The hunters moved around the field, scanning, shooting lasers into the dark, hitting rocks and dust, but not the ship. Max stood near the wall, listening to the vibrations. He barked once and looked at Leo, then pointed his nose upward. Leo understood. One of the hunters had moved above the field, ready to drop a bomb to flush them out. They had to move now or be destroyed. Leo started the engines again at low power and moved the ship forward. Max jumped to the side panel and pushed a red button that opened the back chamber. Inside was a small drone armed with flares and heat packs. Leo launched the drone and sent it flying to the left, away from the ship. The hunters saw the heat and turned all weapons toward it. They fired a storm of lasers and missiles. The drone exploded in light and smoke, hiding the escape ship as it darted toward the moon. The moon came into view, gray and empty, its surface full of holes and craters. The old base was near the edge, a small black dot against the dust. Leo guided the ship into the largest crater and landed near a rock wall. He opened the hatch and ran outside with Max and Lara. Behind him, they found a hidden panel and pressed a code. The wall opened, revealing a dark tunnel leading down into the base. Inside the base, the air was dry, but clean lights flickered to life, showing old machines and empty rooms. Leo closed the door and activated the shield. Max scanned the area for threats, but nothing moved. Lyra sat on the floor, tired but calm. She looked at Leo and asked if they were safe for now. He said yes, but only for a little while. The hunters would search every rock, every shadow, until they found them. Leo checked the supplies and found water, food, and a few weapons, but nothing strong enough to fight the hunters. He sat down and looked at Max. Max lay beside Lyra, his body still sore, but his eyes full of fire. Leo remembered the stories about Max, how he was born during a storm, how he saved his trainer from a burning cave, how he once guided a team through acid rain to rescue trapped miners. Max was not just a dog, he was a soldier, a hero, A heart that never stopped. Lyra leaned against Max and closed her eyes, her voice soft as she whispered, "Thank you again." Max closed his eyes too, resting at last, but ready to rise again if danger came near. Outside, the stars kept burning, and the hunters kept hunting, but in this small, quiet corner of space, the bond between a girl, a man, and a dog burned brighter than any machine could ever seethe. Base was quiet like an old dream trapped under the dust of time. The walls hummed with faded power, the lights flickered like tired stars. Leo moved through the halls with slow steps, his hands brushing against the control panels, his eyes checking every screen for signs of movement. Outside, the hunters were not seen yet, but that did not mean they had gone away. They were patient, they were silent, they would wait as long as it took. Lyra sat near a console, her small hands holding her toy, her eyes watching Max, who was lying beside her, his breathing steady, his wounds healing slowly, his spirit strong. She spoke softly to him, telling him stories from her childhood, about stars and songs and flowers that used to grow in the palace garden. Max listened without blinking, his eyes fixed on her face like he understood every word. Leo returned with a small pack of supplies. He placed water and food in front of them and smiled. Lyra smiled back, but her eyes held a shadow. She asked if the hunters would find them. Leo said maybe, but not yet, maybe not soon, but he could not promise safety, not in a galaxy where machines hunted children and kindness was rare. Max stood and walked to the far wall. He sniffed around, then barked once. Leo followed and found a hidden panel behind a rusted cabinet. He opened it and saw a tunnel going deeper underground. The tunnel was dark and full of cables and wires. Leo took a light and stepped in. Max followed close, his body low, his nose twitching. With every step they walked for many minutes, the tunnel growing colder and tighter until they reached a large door covered in symbols. Leo pressed his hand on the scanner, but nothing happened. Lyra stepped forward and touched the center of the door. With her palm, the symbols lit up, and the door slid open, revealing a chamber filled with glowing crystals and a round machine in the middle. The room pulsed with energy, the walls alive with color, the air warm and heavy with power. Leo stepped forward and looked at the machine. It was old and strange, full of alien tech and human wires. It looked like a fusion of two worlds. Lyra said it was a ship, a siege ship made long ago to protect life and escape war. It could grow into a full vessel, but only if awakened by someone pure of heart. Leo looked at Max, then at Lyra. He asked how to wake it. Lyra said the machine needed trust. It needed someone who had nothing but still gave everything, someone who did not run even when left behind. She looked at Max and said he was the key. Leo was confused. He asked how a dog could wake a ship. Lyra said Max had already done more than most kings or warriors. He had come for her, he had stayed with her, he had saved her again and again. She walked to the ship and placed her toy on the center panel. The crystals around the room lit up and began to spin. Leo stepped back as the floor shook. A soft hum filled the air, and the ship began to change its shape, stretching, growing, becoming more like a real vessel with seats and walls and engines. Max stepped forward and barked. The hum grew louder. The lights turned blue and the panel glowed with a soft light. Suddenly, alarms rang out in the base. The sensors showed red dots moving fast. The hunters had found them. Leo ran back to the surface and looked at the screens. 5 ships closing in. No time to run, no place to hide. He returned to the chamber and shouted that the ship must launch now. Lyra nodded and climbed inside. Max followed and sat beside her. Leo closed the door and activated the shield. The chamber began to rise through the ground. Ship broke through the surface into the cold night sky. The hunter ships turned and opened fire. Lasers and bombs flew through the stars. Leo pushed the controls. The ship moved like it had wings. The engines roared. The shields held for now, but they would not last forever. Max barked and pointed with his nose toward the asteroid belt. Leo understood it was a dangerous path, but it was their only chance. The ship entered the field, dodging rocks and spinning between giants. The hunters followed, firing again and again. The ship shook but did not fall. Lyra closed her eyes and touched the panel, whispering to the ship, asking it to fly, asking it to trust her. Max stood on his seat and barked louder, his voice like thunder in the storm. The ship responded, its speed rising, its engines glowing white. One by one, the hunter ships hit rocks or lost control until only one was left. It fired a last shot that hit the wing. The ship spun and fell toward a small moon. Leo fought the controls. Max jumped to help, pressing buttons with his paws. Lyra held tight and whispered her name, her story, her dream. The ship heard her and slowed down, landing hard but safe on the surface of the moon. The dust settled, the stars quiet, the hunters gone, at least for now. Leo checked Lyra. She was safe. Max was tired, but standing. The ship had passed the test, and so had they. The final test was not just fire or speed. It was heart, it was loyalty, it was the choice to keep going when everything said, "Stop." Lyra hugged Max, her eyes full of light. She said, "This is not the end." Max barked once and wagged his tail. The journey was not over, but they had proved something no machine could understand. They had proved the power of a bond, the strength of a promise, the fire of a heart that never gave up. Shall the first begin? Part 7? The grand finale will close the arc with emotional impact and satisfying resolution, all in the same simple and suspenseful style. The small moon was quiet and cold. The sky above was black and wide, full of stars that blinked like silent watchers. The ship stood in the middle of a dusty valley, its metal sides scratched, its engines humming with slow power inside the ship. Leo sat near the control panel, his eyes heavy, his hands shaking from the last battle, his heart still pounding, but calm now. For the first time in many hours, Lyra stood near the window, her eyes on the stars, her hands folded in front of her. She had not spoken since the landing, her face calm, her mind full of thoughts. She had seen so much, lost so much, cried so much, and now there was only one thing left to do. She turned and walked toward Max, who sat in the center of the room, his fur still dusty, his legs wrapped with bandages, but his eyes bright and clear. She knelt beside him and placed her hand on his head. He leaned into her touch and closed his eyes. She whispered words in her native tongue, words of promise, words of peace, words of love. Leo watched them from the corner of the room. He saw something in Lyra that he had not seen before, not fear, not sadness, but strength. Not the strength of war or weapons, but the strength to care, the strength to choose. The ship gave a soft sound. The panel blinked. A message waiting from a nearby beacon. It was an old human station, still working, still listening. Leo pressed the button and heard the voice of a woman. She spoke with care, asking who they were, asking if they needed help. Leo answered with a short message he gave their location, their status, and asked for a rescue ship. The woman replied and said help was on the way. Outside, the wind began to rise, small waves of dust sweeping across the valley. The ship shook slightly, not from danger, but from old wounds, the structure tired from all it had survived. Leo stood and checked the systems. He walked to the engine room and adjusted a few switches. Max followed him slowly, his body tired, but his spirit always strong. Leo looked at him and smiled. He said, "We made it, Max, we really did." Back in the main room, Lyra sat alone. She held her toy in her lap and stared at it in silence. The toy was old, the colors faded, the edges torn, but it was her last piece of home. She looked at the small face on the toy and remembered her mother, remembered the songs she used to sing, remembered the way her father smiled when she danced, remembered how it felt to be loved. She stood and walked outside. The door opened with a soft hiss, and the wind met her face. The moon was silent but not empty. The stars above looked down like gentle eyes. Max followed her outside and sat beside her. They looked at the sky together, no words needed, no sound, just peace pure and deep. Leo joined them a moment later and stood behind them, his hands in his pockets, his eyes on the stars. A sound broke the silence, a ship entering orbit, its light cutting across the sky like a blade of gold. It moved slow, then fast, then stopped above them. The human rescue team had arrived, their signal clear, their voice strong and warm. Leo spoke to them, gave them the data, gave them the story. Not all the words, just enough they understood. They said they would land soon. They said they would bring them home. Lyra looked at Leo and asked what home meant to him. He thought for a long time, then said, "Maybe it is not a place, maybe it is who we are with. Maybe it is who stays when no one else does." Lyra nodded and looked at Max. He looked back and wagged his tail. She smiled and touched his ear. She said then, "This is my home and always will." Beatty rescue ship landed gently, its lights bright. Its doors open. A small team stepped out with warm clothes, clean water, and soft words. They treated Max with care, gave Lyra a blanket, gave Leo a nod of respect. They guided them inside and closed the door. The engines hummed and the ship rose into the sky, leaving behind the moon, the dust, the war, the broken world that tried to take everything from them. In the main room of the ship, Lyra sat between Max and Leo, her hands in theirs, her eyes full of hope. The crew asked her what she wanted now. what future she dreamed, what place she wished to go. She looked at them and said, I want to go where Max goes. I want to stay with him forever. Leo smiled and said, then we go together no matter what. The crew did not ask more. They saw what mattered. They saw the truth not written in reports or data, but written in eyes and hands. In quiet moments, they flew toward the nearest station, where safety waited, where peace waited, where a new life could begin. Max rested his head on Lyra's lap and closed his eyes. She leaned back and whispered, thank you one last time, not because it was the end, but because it was the beginning, because in all the galaxy and all the stars and all the silence, there was still something that could not be broken, the choice. To love, the choice to stay, the choice to protect, and she chose love.